Supreme Court Justice Stephen Breyer formally announced his retirement today at the White House. President Biden followed up Breyer's remarks with his plans for selecting the next justice to serve on the court.
The person I will nominate will be someone with extraordinary qualifications, character, experience, and integrity. And that person will be the first Black woman ever nominated to the United States Supreme Court.
Biden said he'll make his choice before the end of February, but timing is key. In a letter to the president, Breyer said he would leave the bench in late June or early July, assuming that his successor has been nominated and confirmed by the Senate at that point. It typically takes 2 or 3 months for the Senate to confirm a president's nominee, with the exception of Justice Amy Coney Barrett, whose Senate Republicans rushed to get confirmed in a month and a half just before the 2020 election. With the slimmest of majorities in the chamber, Democrats' best chance of confirming a new justice faces a November deadline. Democratic leaders in the Senate promised a swift confirmation period. The Senate Majority Leader wrote in a statement that the nominee will be confirmed with all deliberate speed. The chairman of the Senate Judiciary Committee promised to move the nominee expeditiously through the process, but one Senate Republican has already tried to pump the brakes, saying there is no need for any rush. We can take our time. It is a lifetime appointment, after all. In a statement, the Republican minority leader in the Senate also warned Biden not to outsource his list of potential nominees to the radical left, which is ironic given that all 3 of Donald Trump's Supreme Court nominees were from the Federalist Society, the right-wing legal network that espouses conspiracy theories about the election. Shockingly or not, Mitch McConnell championed all those confirmations. Joining me now to discuss, Dr. Anthea Butler, professor and chair of religious studies at the University of Pennsylvania. So, Dr. Butler, Breyer's ready to go. It's all up to the Democrats as to whether or not they can get this done in time. Now, they have 8 months before for the November elections, but not really, because no one wants to be doing this in the heat of the election cycle. So, how much time do they realistically have?
Once he does the announcement, I say 2.5 months tops. And that's generous, because basically what's going to happen is that all kinds of obstructions will get in the way. The machine on the right will begin, and whoever this nominee will be is going to be subjected to lots of things, not just from people on the right and Republicans, but on white people and Democrats that are moderates that are like, well, is this person qualified? And we've already been seeing some of that already in social media and other places. So I think that it must be moved with all deliberate speed, but you have a couple of speed bumps named Manson and Cinema that always throw a monkey wrench in things. And so I'd like to really know what Biden is going to do to make sure, as long as with Chuck Schumer, to make sure that everything goes the way it should for this candidate.
I'm glad you brought up Manson and Cinema, because, with the new rules that the Republicans actually put into place, breaking the filibuster rules around Supreme Court justice, the Democrats only need 50+1. They have 50+1. But that, again, puts Manson and Cinema back into the kingmaker's seat. So do you see has there been any discussion? Manson said anything, given any signs that he might not like certain kinds of justices?
Well, I don't know if he's given any signs. I just think he's recalcitrant. So whatever happens at this point, he's going to have something to say about anybody, even if they're absolutely perfect. So I don't discount him throwing a monkey wrench in this. I don't discount Cinema throwing a monkey wrench in this. I think what has to be done from this administration is to make sure that you pull these people in starting right now and start to talk to them about the importance of this particular person. One of the things that people have been saying is sort of like, hopefully the Democrats don't mess up this one, but we have 2 people who could possibly mess it up. And then the problem is that also the messaging has to be right. whoever is the person that Biden will choose by the end of February needs to be someone that everybody gets behind, that has a pristine record, and someone who is unimpeachable, so that even if they get attacked, there's a way that the Democrats, and especially this administration, can come back forcefully and to make sure that they're standing 100% behind the candidate.
Does unimpeachable also mean moderate? I mean, the reason I asked that question, are we ever going to be able to see another Thurgood Marshall? You know, he's unapologetic. He is a liberal. He believed very strongly in very progressive views for his time. Could we ever get another black justice who is just as progressive as Thurgood Marshall?
Probably not right now, and that's what I'll say. I think right now what we need is anybody's going to look progressive up against Clarence Thomas, okay? So let's just go right there. Anybody who he picks at the end of February is going to look like a progressive compared to the rest of the court. Even if he picks a moderate, they will look progressive against the rest of this Supreme Court. So I think that the bigger question here is this: how do we start to rebuild the court? One of the things that people have forgotten is that there was a whole study done about, should we increase the size of the court? Should we do this? And Biden decided no, that he did not want to do this. I think that was a mistake, frankly. You could have increased the court by 2 judges, and that would make more of a balance than what we have right now, and would ensure that Democrats would be able to at least balance out the court so that the court would be representative of the people of this country. Right now, it is not representative of the people of this country, with the 5 conservative justices who sit in judgment over all the rest of us, who don't really are in touch with anybody else except the constituency and the Federalist Society that put them there in the first place.
So I have about 30 seconds, so this is going to have to be a quick answer, but I just have to get this question in. Would Manson and Cinema, do you believe, blow this up? Because that would be political suicide. Black people are already drifting away from Biden and the Democrats because they're frustrated. This would be beyond frustration if they were to blow this up for a black woman. Do you believe that they would do that?
I would hope that they wouldn't, but I can tell you right now that I wouldn't trust them as far as I could throw them. And I think
that sounds just like my mother. I was telling somebody that the other day. My mother always says that. I don't trust you. You sound like my mother right now. Dr. Anthea Butler, thank you so much for joining us today. I really appreciate it. As always,